Oh. 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 Satchidanandarupaya Vishvotpatyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishwaraha Sadyo Hridyavarudhyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistatkshanat. Hari Om and greetings from Niagara Falls. In a previous class, our discussion subject was, what is a noticeable difference between one who feels bhakti and one who does not feel bhakti? And one of the strong reflections that you all came up with, and I support also, is a strong sign of bhakti is one who doesn't ask, why me? Whenever we ask why me, it tends to be in the context of negativity. Why me is this article being circumstance happening? But a bhakta feels Bhagwan is looking at them and so looking after them. Even to the extent of, if a bhakta has to go to Naraka, as in has to go to hell, they still accept that because they know that is a process of rehabilitation or purification. As we complete Vedanta and Bhagavata, this morning is hour 167. Are you one who is still asking verbally or mentally, why me? Or are you a personality now that accepts all that happens is a call for me to come home to Bhagwan? We are flowing through an immense review of Bhagavata. Imagine 168 hours condensed into 4 hours. And so for me, this is an immense effort to try to review this. At the same time, I am immensely grateful that I've gotten to go through all of my notes, particularly the 10th section, which is about Bhagwan Krishna only. When we review, we reflect. When we reflect, we personalize. When we personalize, we practice. And when we practice, we feel peace. Please try to remember that sequence. Review, reflect, personalize, practice, peace. In the third section, the theme is creation. The fourth section, the theme is diversification, how creation becomes more creative. In the fifth section, the theme is position. How does diversification relate to humans living in this diversification? The sixth section, I'm rechanting our verse from chapter 12 of the 12th section. Daksha janma prachetobhyaha tat putrinam cha santitihi yato deva suranaraha tiryanagga kagadayaha. In the sixth section, highlights are the rebirth of Prajapati Daksha as the son of the Prachetas, and the progeny of Daksha's daughters who initiated the races of semi-gods, demons, human beings, animals, serpents, birds, and so on. All of this is described. The sixth section focuses on Poshana, or grace. Poshana, or grace. There is a general grace, which we call kripa, and there's a specific grace, which we call anugraha. Everyone has a general grace on them. But when we start to work harder and smarter, when we start to practice bhakti, then specific grace comes into our lives. And the way that I've shared this in different forums is living becomes easier. I never said life becomes easier. Life will always be hard. I can tell by the faces of everyone here that life is hard, but living becomes easier. Now we continue. We have to cover 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 5 skandhas we have to cover today. So please bring your minds to your ears and to your eyes. The 7th skandha or section, the theme is Ooty. I think that's a tourist destination in India, correct? Ooty, that's where your minds are right now. Do you think really I'm going to talk about that? Ooty, and in terms of English, it would be nature. Nature here means not the body and breath and mind and intellect, but rather the ego or vasanas. What is my personality type through which this gets expressed into my intellect, mind, and soul? Ooty, or nature. And here I am reading chapter 12, verse 18. These are all references for you to keep on studying. Verse 18. Tvashtrasya janma nidhanam putrayoscha ditirtvijaha daityeshwarasya charitam praladasya mahatmanaha. Translation: O Brahmanas, also recounted are the births and deaths of Vritrasura and of Diti's sons Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, as well as the history of the greatest of Diti's descendants, the exalted soul, Prahlada. Thus far, prior to this section, I have shared 28 lakshanas, or lakshyas. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 7 sections times 4. Overall, I'm going to share 54 lakshas. So we've completed 28. Now we're on the 7th section. I've already told you what the theme is. So that's the 29th laksha. I continue. In this section, a highlight is Hiranyakashipu. Hiranya means gold, and Kashipu means sleeping. The one who's always sleeping on gold, which means the one whose interest is always gross. Hiranyakashipu is very much someone who had a lot of dharma, artha, and kama in his life, but he never directed it towards moksha. And if I can share this in a different way, he had a lot of power, but what he lacked was purity. He had power like Ravana, but lacked purity or lacked direction. However, I told you about general grace. Hiranyakashipu's general grace is that his son was Prahlada. Prahlada is the second most foremost personality in Srimad Bhagavata. Naturally, the foremost is Bhagavan Krishna. He is the icon of Bhagavan and the icon of a Bhakta. He's known as the Mahabhagavata, is Prahlada. We name our kids and grandkids so many interesting names, when really we should be naming our kids Prahlad, Prahlada. This Mahabhagavata, that is Prahlada, he had shared with the people around him on how to practice bhakti. These are the 9 steps of introducing bhakti to completing bhakti. Here's what they are. Many of you know this. I'm reading it out again. And we're practicing this in our Narada Bhakti Sutra class. Number 1, Shravana. Number 2, Kirtana. 3, Smarana. 4, Sevaya. These terminations, like instead of seva, how come it's sevaya? The point is you have to practice seva, not intellectualize it. So the Sanskrit declension changes them. Like Om Namah Shivaya. This is an offering to Bhagavan Shiva. Next, Archana. Lots of people have the name Archana. Whether they actually practice is quite different. After that, Vandana, same. Lots of people name Vandana, but do they practice Vandana? That is different. And then after that, there are 3 special practices in bhakti, and they are to become Bhagavan Krishna's dasya. Dasya, to become his servant. But then you become closer to becoming his sakhya. But then you become the closest. It is nivedana, that is surrendering any sort of separation. Now, if I can give you one more insight into all of this, the last 3, why I highlighted they're special. Dasya is like Dvaita. I am the servant, and the divine is my master. But more evolved than that is like a part-whole relationship, which in Sanskrit we call Vishishta Advaita. It is partial oneness. But if you surrender separation, that's that nivedana, that would then be Advaita. Not partial oneness, but oneness. And the third highlight from this chapter, my apologies, from this section, is a lot of details given on, based on your varna and your ashrama, how you should live. Based on your personality type and based on your position type. Position type means externally, how old you are, where you live, things like that. A lot of details on how to live like this. But the reason for this, why these details are given, that if you follow these guidelines, you will go from the relative to the absolute. The whole point of understanding the gunas is to go past the gunas, not to get deeper into the gunas. So whenever you come across teachings on varna, that means the color of your personality, or ashrama, that's the position you have in life, try to think big picture. Otherwise, you just get, instead of steel chains, you have gold chains then. But you're still chained. Good. Number 8. I really like the 8th skanda. The 8th skanda is on Sat, S-A-T, but I want you to put a hyphen there, Sat Dharma. Because of Sanskrit, Sadharma. But why I'm sharing it as Sat, because I'm trying to use a single word to describe each of these sections. If it's too many words, you'll forget. If it's one word, you will remember. In English, evolution. Evolution. All of us follow Dharma, but this section is teaching us how to intensify our practices. Very practical. I am reading to you the 19th verse of the 12th chapter of the 12th section. 19. Manvantaranu katanam gajendrasya vimokshanam manvantaraavatarascha Vishnur hayashiradayaha. And here's the translation. The reign of each Manu, the liberation of Gajendra. Do you remember we studied a lot about this great elephant? And the special incarnations of Lord Vishnu in each Manvantara, such as Lord Hayagriva, are described as well. Opening it up more. The 4 ways where you can take your dharma and make it sat dharma. You can intensify the way you're living. A very beautiful section. Number 1 is smarana. Number 2, dana. Number 3, pratignya. And number 4, raksha. Now I'll explain more about these, okay? I gave you point number 1 is the theme. Point number 2 is these are 4 ways you can intensify from dharma to saddharma. So now here's point number 3. Smarana, the katha relating to this is about Gajendra. How many of you realistically remember the details from Gajendra's katha? Good, nice to see your hands up. In this really beautiful katha, when Bhagwan Hari comes to free Gajendra, who does he free first? That crocodile. I think in Sanskrit the word is makara, means crocodile. And so the implication for us, suppose you don't identify as a great bhakta. It's too intimidating, you don't know enough, whatever it may be. But if you have bhakti to a bhakta, you too become free. When Sri Tulasidasa thought he was going to die, who did he remember? He wanted to be with Bhagwan Rama, but he felt he couldn't, so he went through the middle person, which is Hanumanji. But who's Hanumanji holding on to? Bhagwan Rama. So he did see Bhagwan Rama and he never died. That's why Hanuman Chalisa is chanted when someone is not well. Reactively. Proactively, you chant it anyways. So have bhakti to a bhakta. In terms of dana, a practical application for us. This related to the Kshira Sagara Mantana, the churning of the Milky Ocean. And the main personality who was doing this and that was Indra. So you have Gajendra, then Indra. What Indra learned carefully in this whole katha is that he's not the doer. Whose ocean is it? Bhagwan Narayana. Who brought the mountain? Bhagwan Narayana. Who called Bhagwan Shiva? Bhagwan Narayana. So whenever we think of the churning of the Milky Ocean, we think of Mohini. But what we should be thinking about is all of the doing that happens in our life is because of Bhagwan. And relatedly, in the churning of the Milky Ocean, what was the first substance that came out? Poison. And what was the last substance that came out? The first one was poison. The last one was amrita, deathlessness or fearlessness. So for us too, as we go in our journey inside, the first thing you're going to find is poison, negativity, jealousy, incompleteness. But keep going, and you will find your nature. Next was pratignya. So smarana means remembrance. Then I talked about dana means giving. So Indra always gave up doership to Bhagwan. Next is pratignya. Pratignya means following through on your commitments, following through on your promises. This relates to Bali. Raja Bali or Mahabali. When Bhagwan Vamana asked for 3 steps, then Raja Bali gave him those 3 steps, but really he gave all 3 of his states, all 3 of his equipments, all 3 of his bodies. But who warned him not to do this? Rishi Shukracharya. Rishi Shukracharya gives a very lovely, he's like the original financial advisor. Okay? So here is your financial planning from Srimad Bhagavatam. Not that anyone's going to follow through with it, but since we're talking about pratignya, this is a promise that we are making. 1/5 of your wealth should go to kama. That is your own pleasure. I'm not going to ask if you do it already. Yes, that's like a blanket check mark. Then 1/5 of our resources should go towards our artha. That is our own possessions. Our cell phones and our computers and cars, checked off. Number 3 is 1/3 should, did I say 1/3? I meant 1/5. I'm going in fifth, everyone. 1/5 should go towards yasha. Yasha means one's own position. What you do in life to elevate your position. For a lot of people, that's education. You get more degrees to put on your business cards, correct? Number 4 is swajana. Your 4th, 20% goes to swajana. Point to me, swajana. People who look like you and have the same last name. Okay? Your people. So 60% towards the individuality, 20% towards family, and the last 20% is swadharma. Or let me say that differently. Dharmaya, the correct actual word is dharmaya. 20% should be for society, humanity. Even that, swajana, our communities are people too, correct? But dharmaya means to encourage responsibility. So now, should I ask you about the last one? Are you giving 20% of your resources? You know Bhagavatam's coming to an end and I'm going to make a Dakshina announcement. You do know that, yes? But Bhagwan's the doer, not me. All of this placement is by Bhagwan. And now, Raksha which means protection, this katha relates to Satyavrata. Satyavrata, and how he found that really tiny fish, but instead of throwing that fish away, what did he do? He protected that fish. And what did that fish eventually do to him and everyone? Protected back. Protected back. So, dharmo rakshati, rakshita. That is a great example of this. My fourth point in this section, my final point here is, I'm going to redefine these words into smarana is where one is practicing humility. Gajendra thought he could free himself, but he finally realized he couldn't. Dana is practicing generosity. Give up doership. Pratignya is practicing integrity. If you signed up for something, then finish it. And finally, raksha is security, for you to live for your own security and to share that with others. Good, everyone? We've now covered the Mahatmya plus 8 skandhas. I'm continuing into the 9th skandha. Before I get into this, I want to do a check with all of you because there's a change in thought flow in the 9th skandha. Please keep being active with your mind. Srimad Bhagavatam has a singular teaching of surrender. You will know that you're practicing Srimad Bhagavatam if you're more surrender-oriented. The Mahatmya, which is Skanda 0, in English, that is to encourage quietude, for you to be ready for Bhagavata. Just like in a movie, right? They say, shut your cell phones off, stop talking, those kinds of matters. I do the same here. Turn your cell phones on. Everyone, pay attention. Skandhas 1 and 2 are a package trying to create identification. To identify with Raja Parikshita, to identify with Rishi Shuka. It's very much like chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. Skandhas 3 through 5, 3, 4, 5, they're trying to encourage belief. Belief. So many of these sections talk about technicalities of creation and how to practice this, how to personalize this. This relates to Shravana. Shravana. Then skandhas 6 through 8, they evolve from belief to faith. To encourage faith, to go from Shravana to Manana. Manana. See how it's not about creation anymore, but it's about the grace that comes with creation and so on. And now, sections 9 through 11, we're about to get into 9. From belief to faith to trust. Trust. Who is born in the 9th section? Bhagwan Rama. Who is born in the 10th section? Bhagwan Krishna, and so on. Trust. This is not a matter of Shravana or Manana. It's a matter of Nididhyasana. I had mentioned that to really experience Bhagavatam, you have to be in a contemplative mood, not a sleepy mood. For many, it's the same, correct? To be in a contemplative mood. The 9th section also is very practical. It has the theme of Nasha. Nasha. Nasha of what? Vasanas. Vasana Nasha. And so the English word is transformation. You're an ordinary person, then you intensify your practices, that's section 8. Now you're a transformed person, that's section 9. And really, if you transform yourself completely, what happens in section 12? you feel Bhagavan Krishna, you feel joy. I'm reading to you the 24th verse. Ramasya koshalendrasya charitam kilbishapaham nimer anga parityagaha janakanam cha sambhavaha. The Bhagavatam now narrates the sanctifying pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, the king of Koshala, and also explains how King Nimi abandoned his material body. The appearance of the descendants of Raja Janaka is also mentioned. I'm pausing. Everyone's with me? Everyone's with me? Everyone's with me? Okay, this is a really important few weeks of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, your raw for this week is going to be intense. I'm going to remind you of the reference I'm making right now. The second laksha of the 9th section. I've given you the theme. Now here's laksha number 2. There are lots of great personalities who are highlighted, personalities who have transformed themselves, like Raja Ambarisha. Do you all remember Raja Ambarisha? What did he have to do for 1 year? He had to run because there was that chakra that was chasing him. There's a lot of these kinds of references in our scriptures. Sugriva had to run. Ambarisha had to run. Rishi Durvasa had to run. So run, everyone. That's why we have our running from the mind community. We should have put a chakra on our t-shirts. Instead of Hanumanji, we should have put a chakra there. Another great transformed personality is Raja Harishchandra. A lot of you who grew up in India, you would know some of these names. Another great personality in this section is Raja Bhagirata. What did Raja Bhagirata do for us? Yes, gave us access to the Ganga. So lots of awesome personalities. And they were awesome because they worked hard and smart. They didn't live in an easy way. I went in detail into the efforts of Bhagirata. Also in this skanda, 2 prominent avatars that flow through here. Who is the first Rama in the avatars? Yes, the Rama with the parashu. Show me with your hands what parashu looks like. You all have it with one hand, but you're not strong enough to hold it with one hand. 2 hands, okay? Parashu Rama. And then our second Rama is Rama, also known as Kodanda Rama. He used to hold his bow with one hand. We'd have to hold it with 2. Do you remember the details of when people were trying to lift up Bhagwan Shiva's bow? So they are highlighted also. And the final highlight of this section is the methodology on how to change your vasanas. And the 3 methodologies are, for your light vasanas, it is called kshaya, exhaustion. That's correct. You go through an experience, you don't need to go through it again. For medium weight vasanas, one has to go through vasana parivartana, which means substitution or sublimation. Parivartana. It means you change direction. But the theme of this chapter is vasana nasha. That is disidentification, where you have the knowledge that you don't have vasanas. Then you become, I feel, one of, there's a list of greatest personalities in Bhagavata. Another one that should be included is Ranti Deva. How many of you remember what Ranti Deva prayed for by show of hands? What he had prayed for? Okay. This should be our prayer. He prays to Bhagavan Narayana that instead of you being in everyone's heart, let me be first in their heart. Sounds like Elon Musk, correct? People think about me before God. But the reason why he wanted this, he wanted to take everyone's sorrows. Whatever hardships you have in your heart, he wanted to take that so that, secondly, we would feel Bhagwan is there. What a prayer. Only someone who doesn't have vasanas can take on other people's vasanas, correct? Okay, I know I'm taking lots of time, but we're going to keep going into the 10th section now. We have covered section 0 plus 9. We have covered really 10 sections, 4 lectures each. That's 40. Now in the 10th section, I'm going into six highlights. This was a really difficult section to review for you. I'm happy you put me through it, but it was really difficult. There are 90 chapters in this section. This section has the theme of Ashraya. Ashraya, in English, surrender. You can transform yourself all you want, but finally, you have to surrender even your effort. When we chant Mahamrityunjaya mantra, I again am telling all of you, it is not for people who are sick. That is the wrong practice of this mantra. It is for those who have worked hard and smart for enlightenment, and now they're praying that I can't enlighten myself, so I need your help to separate myself from separation. We tend to dilute these mantras for our own personal experience. It is surrender. I'm reading to you verse 27. Verse 27. Yatra vatirno Bhagavan Krishna kyo jagadishwaraha Vasudeva grihe janma tato vriddhischa gokule. How Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Lord of the universe, descended into this Yadu dynasty, how he took birth in the home of Vasudeva, and how he then grew up in Gokula. All of this is described in detail. Here's the second highlight of this section. In the 6th section, Bhagwan helps us. In the 7th section, after Bhagwan helps us, we still feel so heavy. Remember, that was about Vasana. So in the 8th section, we start to live smarter. In the 9th section, we start to feel lighter then. And the 10th section is the heart of Srimad Bhagavata. When one starts to feel lighter, they start to feel their own heart, they feel the light in their heart. And if that's too poetic for you, a lot of what is shared in this section is all emerges from Bhagwan, exists in Bhagwan, and ends in Bhagwan. Emerges, exists, and ends in Bhagwan. The point being, all belongs to Bhagwan. All belongs to Bhagwan. For you to feel that in your heart. Next highlight is Bhagwan Krishna's living in this section is very Leela-like. Why Leela? So that he can actually practice being Manohara. What does Manohara mean in English? The one who steals your mind. So all of these amazing happenings are for us to be captivated, to be enchanted by him. I had shared with you when we went through this skanda When I say Bhagwan Vishnu, what do you think of? Him lying, correct? Him lying on a snake, or even during the churning of the Milky Ocean, he was also lying down, really lazy, tamasic. When you think of Bhagwan Rama, he wasn't lying, he was always walking, but walking also. Even in our Balivar classes, we have his footprints. But Bhagwan Krishna, when you think of Bhagwan Krishna, what is he doing? Dancing. Nobody's enamored by someone lying down. Walking is also boring, but dancing is very captivating. You see how much Bhagwan loves us. We don't love Bhagwan Narayana, so we need Bhagwan Rama. We don't love Bhagwan Rama, so we need Bhagwan Krishna. But he's very lovable. The word Vamana doesn't mean dwarf, like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. Vamana means most adorable. Most adorable. Babies are adorable. Toddlers are adorable. It doesn't mean dwarf. Next highlight is we tend to think of Bhagwan Narayana becomes an avatara into Bhagwan Krishna. Show me with a hand motion what avatara means. Avatarati means descending, correct? I find that's a very Abrahamic religion sentiment, like God lives in heaven and then joins us on earth. But the words used here are sambhavami, which means manifests and then unmanifests. Now, what is the implication of this? Point to me where God is. Here. God is here. For the ones who can see, they see. For the ones who can't see, they can't see. And more specifically, when there is macro, let me repeat that. When there is micro compromise, when a few people are compromising on dharma in a few ways, that is corrected by sadhus. Think of what Pujya Swami Vivekananda did to the people of Bharat. He corrected their compromise, correct? Gandhiji did the same. But when there's macro compromise, lots of people compromising in lots of ways, a sadhu can't do that. Then Bhagwan has to appear in a micro form. Micro in the sense that this is God, but where is God the most in this room? Over there. Understood. Bhagwan Krishna is infinite, but he appears to be divine in a particular name and form to correct that compromise. Everyone's with me? Okay. It doesn't even matter. I'm just going to keep going go for myself. Next highlight is, speaking more about this compromise, is the compromise that is happening in this section is leaders who are only disguised as leaders. They're actually not suras who are filled with light. They are asuras, filled with darkness, but they're disguising themselves. So it's very hard for the people to correct that. Yes? Imagine we lived in a country where there was a dictatorship who is not dharmic. What do we do about that? In a democracy, it's more manageable. It's not perfect, but it's more manageable. So that's where Bhagwan came and took on the leaders, but disguised leaders. Next highlight, and I think this is my 6th highlight for this skanda. And before I get into it, because it's about the gopis, I just want to share one more not so pleasant part. The disguised leaders, particularly in this chapter, were Dandavaktra and who was the other one? Shishupala. Dandavaktra and Shishupala, who were incarnations of or reincarnations of Jaya and Vijaya. But you'll see, with each incarnation, they became weaker. They became the strongest with Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, then weaker with Ravana and Kumbhakarna. Now, in this, Dandavakta and Shishupala are nobodies. in the time of Bhagavan Krishna, correct? That shows that Jaya and Vijaya got rehabilitated. Yes. So now the final highlight of this section. The 10th section is known as the heart. Now, even if you think of this physiologically, our heart has a lot of physiological systems. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 5 chapters known as the Panchapranas. The Panchapranas. Within the heart, this is the heart of hearts. These chapters are chapters 29 to 33. 29 to 33. I said there's Panchapranas. Out of all of the 5 pranas, which is the most important? Udana. Udana is that mystical force that projects you into another body. When Vivek's body dies, he's not going to breathe anymore. He's not going to defecate anymore. That all stops. But it's the Udana Shakti that carries on even as this body dies. That is chapter 31. That is chapter 31. And so my final thought for this section is, I've already told you, but extending it is, this section very much has to do with Saguna Bhakti. Saguna Bhakti. This is in stark contrast to the 11th section. Okay. Do you want me to pause or can I go into the 11th section too? I'm going. Good. I see a lot of dancing happening, so I'm going to keep going. The 11th section, okay? And this we just completed, so you all remember this, so it's easy. The 11th section, the theme is mukti. Mukti. If you've evolved, if you've transformed, now you surrendered, what should you feel? Mukti. In English, serenity. After you've surrendered, then there's serenity. I'm reading to you the 41st verse. 41st. Mahatyam cha vadastesham varanascha dadhananam bhara vataranam bhumehe nimitti kritya pandavan. There are descriptions of the powers and the depths of the king of Chedi, Paundraka, Shalva, the foolish Dantavaktra, Sambhara, Dvivida, Pita, Mura, Panchajana, and other demons, along with the description of how Varanasi was burned to the ground. The Bhagavatam also recounts how Lord Krishna relieved the earth's burden by engaging the Pandavas in the battle of Kurukshetra. Here are 3 more highlights from this section. This section is not about Saguna Bhakti, but it's about Nirguna Bhakti. It is about practicing bhakti through teachings. Teachings. One's life can go on for only so long, but one's teachings can go on forever. Right at the beginning of this section, there was the Navayogi Gita. These 9 yogis explain so much about bhakti. Another highlight in this section was Bhagavan Krishna's family that consumed itself. It was I think they call it a fratricidal war. It was a war within a family. And I always remember Puja Swami Tejomaya and the sharing. Parents are so bothered by their kids not listening. Bhagavan Krishna's kids and grandkids didn't listen. We don't stand a chance. I remember that so often. And not just Bhagavan Krishna's family, eventually even Bhagavan Krishna. His manifestation became unmanifest. And the final highlight, if we go back to Naimisharanya, Raja Shaunaka asks Rishi Ugrashava 6 questions. The 6th question was, where does Dharma live? The answer is given in this section. It lives in Gita, Uddhava Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Bhikshu Gita, Navayogi Gita. Dharma lives, or Bhagavan Krishna lives in these teachings. Oh.